Hi, my name is Amelia Gray and I'm from Orange County. I live in Laguna Beach. I grew up in San Diego for very formative years of my childhood until I was 8. And then my parents took me to England where I was raised until I was 21. And as soon as I was 21, I came straight back to the beautiful weather and sunshine here in California. And I'm so happy I'm back. I feel like I had a very enchanted, beautiful childhood. I grew up in San Diego up until I was 8 years old. I was actually born in England. We moved here when I was 4 and then spent 4 or 5 years here in Southern California. And then my parents had the inspiration. They were very excited. They wanted me to be English, get to know what it was like to live in England and get to know my culture and all of that. So they had the idea that they would take me back to England and put me in boarding school over there when I was 7.5 while they were moving country. So I lived over there by myself at 7.5 years old for a little under a year until they had moved back to England themselves, which was pretty crazy because I had such a beautiful time in San Diego. Knew all the kids in my neighborhood, would be roller skating around with my boombox, kind of just visiting all my friends every single day. Very good relationship with my parents, who were very much in love. And we'd go and have dinner on the beach, and we were very outdoorsy and just really into the Southern California lifestyle. And then all of a sudden, I'm thrown into a cold climate and cold boarding school, very strict boarding school in England without my parents. And I feel my feet had never really touched the ground until that moment of my life. It was very traumatizing. Like I said, my feet had never touched the ground, is what my therapist that I later had as an adult helped me understand by diving into my childhood and what it was like in San Diego and how I had this, very close relationship with both my parents. And then all of a sudden I'm thrown into this cold British boarding school at 7.5 years old. And the anxiety and the trauma around my mother leaving me there, no anger or upset with my mother. It was just, I didn't want her to leave. Like, I wanted to be with her. She was my best friend, and, she was very tactile and always very nurturing. And to be without her in general, never mind be in a different country to her. And obviously I have a good relationship with my dad as well, but, especially just being without my parents was extremely traumatizing. And I think if I had any abandonment issues, so to speak, it came from that moment in time, because I just remember her dropping me off and having crazy anxiety around it and crying for, hours on end and being inconsolable, and the teachers not knowing what to do because I was just missed my mom so much. My mom would always say, well, honey, I'd try and call you on the telephone, but, you wouldn't even come to the phone, not even once a week. You would always the teachers would tell me told them you were busy and things like that. But as a child, I don't remember that at all. I just remember how much I missed my mom. I don't remember being too busy to go to the phone. But of course, as a kid, you just get involved with things and it pulls your attention. And I didn't realize I was missing my mother's phone calls. But I was so young. I was still at a stage of my life where I was in a dormitory and still wetting the bed. And so that's incredibly embarrassing, being in a dormitory situation and not being mature enough to, not even wet the bed still. And then I got very much bullied by a young girl at my school. She was physically harming me, pinching me and verbally abusing me. And I just felt super isolated, there in this foreign country with an American accent at the time. Now I know I have a British accent, but they put me in elocution lessons as soon as I got to England, and taught me how to speak in a British accent and stuff like that. But I was a young American girl and absolutely thousands upon thousands of miles away from my mother, and it was, yeah, definitely where things started in terms of abandonment problems that I might have had as an adult. Yeah, I mean, I think I want to bridge a little bit because, you know, when my parents moved back to England from San Diego and they were settled, I was a day person. I was going home every evening, going to school every day, like normal. But in England, it's very normal to go to boarding school. So when I got to the age of 13 years old, I'm at that point where I want to be with my friends all the time. And I was actually begging my parents, please let me be a boarder. It's like weird if you're a day person, you're the only one in the whole school. You don't have any friends because, you know, really the socializing happens like, you know, when you're all together all the time. So boarding school isn't a traumatic thing. It just is when your parents live in a foreign country and you've never, you know, you're that young and you're not ready for it. I did become a boarder, you know, at 13, and it was fantastic. I had the best time and boarded all the way up until I was like 18 and left school. And it did make me very independent and comfortable with being away from my parents and comfortable with my individuality and like independence. So I moved back to America when I was 21 years old, at still a young age, moving back to a foreign country without my family, out of choice this time, because I was working in London, working, you know, for a job being paid minimum wage, and I remember running around Soho delivering packages, and it was raining and it was windy and it was freezing cold, and I was like, you know what? I could be in Southern California earning minimum wage in the sunshine. So the penny dropped and I realized like I really would like to come back to Southern California. It was a dreamy part of my childhood, and I did make the decision to move here at 21 years old by myself and create a life for myself. And I feel like that was a healthy choice and that was a desire that was on my heart. But in terms of things that happened as an adult, you know, you'd get into relationships and get triggered by certain things that you maybe feel abandoned because my family still do live in a foreign country. And so, you know, your friends become your family and you create these friendships that feel like family when you're living abroad from your real family. And, you know, if something happens that would upset me or things like that, sometimes I wouldn't have the tools or emotional maturity to know how to address it in a healthy way and let my anger take control or blow up out of proportion and, you know, in turn push people away and feel more abandoned and more isolated because of the way you react to certain things and don't have the tools to know how to deal with it in a mature way. Well, yes, I talk about toxic and depression is actually what I was wanting to pick up on. Like, I'd never really experienced depression. As much as that traumatized me a little bit as a child going to boarding school, I feel like I never knew what depression was until I got married and then struggled through a divorce, and the divorce definitely broke my heart and made me feel depressed, and I'd never experienced depression before or even knew depression was a real thing. Like, people talked about depression and I didn't really understand it until I actually experienced it myself going through this divorce. Like, I felt extremely lonely in my marriage and I was like on my knees praying to God saying, you know, please Lord, something has to change.